Welcome to Digital SAT Deep Dive. My name is Vince. Let's get straight into this. So we have a main idea question. We can tell because it says, what's the main purpose of the text? Pretty obvious question type. And as you may have noticed, the Digital SAT has stuff like poetry and fiction. So you may have to read between the lines. What is this really saying a little bit? Maybe a little challenging if you're not used to reading, fiction from the 19th century. So let's always read the preamble because that can give you some valuable clues, and then we'll break down the question in detail. So this is from Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre. Jane works as a governess at Thornfield Hall. I went on with my day's business tranquilly, but ever and anon, vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield, and I kept involuntarily framing advertisements and pondering conjectures about new situations. These thoughts I did not think to check. They might germinate and bear fruit if they could. So we've all been there, right? She wants to quit her job. Doesn't that make sense? She's going about her business. She's daydreaming. Her brain is wandering. She's thinking about quitting, right? And then she's just kind of talking about that more. So one thing you might notice here is there's parts of this text might be harder or easier for you to understand. I think we all could probably understand why I should quit Thornfield. We're like, okay, she works there, wants to quit. But notice we have continuation happening. We don't have any kind of shift. And that's indicated because we don't see a shifting word. It's also indicated because we see a semicolon and because of the word and. And this tells us, these kind of structural clues tell us that she's still talking about quitting and thinking about quitting. That's important to notice if you don't understand everything she's saying. These punctuation marks kind of tell us, guess what? She's still thinking about quitting. We don't have any kind of shift to another topic. So that's something you can use as a little bit of a cheat if you're like, hey, I didn't understand half of that. You kind of did. She's still just talking about quitting. So if unless you see a shift to a new topic indicated by like a however or a but, chances are we're still on the same topic. Okay, so let's, as always, try to predict the answer before we let the choices mess with our head. So what's the main purpose of the text? To kind of give us Jane's thoughts about quitting her job, right? Okay, we already kind of knew that. Let's go choice by choice and think about the wording and see what we can do. So what about A? To convey a contrast between Jane's outward calmness and internal restlessness. Now, that's not the subject matter that we predicted. We predicted it was going to be about her thinking about quitting her job. But if we go back to the beginning, remember she was going on with her business tranquilly. That's the same thing as outward calmness. But then she's kind of pondering quitting, and it seems like she's kind of restless internally. So I think this is right. I think A is right. Let's read the rest of the choices just to make sure. B, to emphasize Jane's loyalty to the people she works for. There's nothing about that at all. What about C, to demonstrate that Jane finds her situation both challenging? I like challenging because she's, thinking about quitting, but deeply fulfilling? Hell no. Hell no. Nothing about that in the text. What about D, to describe Jane's determination to secure employment outside of Thornfield Hall? This is our toughest elimination, but it is wrong. What do you think about that? Doesn't she want to secure employment outside of Thornfield Hall? I mean, she kind of does. And she is certainly thinking about quitting. She's pondering new situations. That's maybe the most direct connection to securing employment outside of the hall. But she's not really determined. And this is what we like to do with choices. We like to pick on individual words. I really don't like the word determined. Her brain is just wandering. It's involuntarily doing things and wondering stuff. And she doesn't stop it, but I think it's not really fair to say that she's super determined to quit. And it certainly doesn't really directly say that she is determined to secure employment. So we really need to stick to what the text says. And that's not going to work just because she never really even mentions employment outside of the hall. It's just all very vague, so A is correct. A doesn't have anything we have a problem with. And this is a good rule of thumb for you if you're kind of stuck between two choices. One of those two choices is wrong, and it's wrong for probably a pretty specific reason. Whereas A, you might not love A, but there isn't anything wrong with it. It's kind of hard to be wrong if you're vague, So A may be a bit vague for you, but also not wrong. D, maybe a little more specific, but it has some things we really do have a problem with. So use that as a strategy if you're stuck on a question like this. Just attack choices word by word. Think about those individual words to see if you can find a word that actually isn't reflected by the text.